This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a global streaming platform bringing visionary films to audiences all over the world. And for all you David Lynch fans out there, as of now, you can stream Twin Peaks on Mubi, one of the best and scariest television shows of all time. For a limited time, listeners can get a whole month free to watch Twin Peaks and so much more on Mubi. Redeem your special offer now at mubi.com/EOH. That's mubi.com/EOH. In 1931, Universal Pictures had two massive box office hits with Dracula and Frankenstein, and thus the horror genre in Hollywood was born. Over the next few years, all major studios tried to replicate the success of Frankenstein with their own gothic horror films. Paramount released Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Warner Brothers released The Mystery of the Wax Museum. MGM released Freaks. United Artists released White Zombie. But it was Universal that continued to be the number one studio for horror, with several more gothic horror hits over the next few years, including The Mummy, Murders in the Rue Morgue, The Black Cat, and James Whale's The Invisible Man and The Old Dark House. Finally, in 1935, Universal began production for a sequel to their biggest hit, Frankenstein. James Whale, who was initially reluctant to return to the world of Frankenstein and to horror in general, insisted he would only take this project if he could bring a more fun, comedic tone to the story. The result was Bride of Frankenstein, a truly unique horror sequel that remains unmatched in its balance of comedy, horror, and pathos. 90 years on, Bride of Frankenstein is widely regarded as one of the best horror sequels ever made, the best Universal monster movie, and the best film in the first golden age of the horror genre.
You make man like me? No. Woman, friend for you.
Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of man-made monsters, and we discuss James Whale's deranged and beautiful horror sequel, Bride of Frankenstein.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
The Bride of Frankenstein. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer, and as ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 11th season, covering the evolution of man-made monsters, and this is part 4. In this week's episode, as that intro suggested, we are going to be discussing James Whale's incredible 1935 horror film, The Bride of Frankenstein. This will be a spoilerific review. If you haven't seen the film, what are you doing? Go and watch it immediately. It's a breezy 70 minutes long as well. You know, that's like half the length of most episodes of Stranger Things, I would say, right? So go and watch the film before you listen to our discussion. So joining me to discuss Bride of Frankenstein, a returning guest. He was here last week to discuss the original Frankenstein with me. The initial plan was we were supposed to be discussing both these movies in one episode, but, you know, there was too much to say, so we had to split it into two. And so he's back for a second week running. A huge welcome to James Swanton. Hello, James.
Hello, Mike. Back again.
Back again. Here we are, the sequel, the long-awaited sequel to last week's discussion.
Absolutely. It's been a matter of days since we were last talking about Frankenstein together.
Absolutely. There was a lot. We discovered, as it turns out, there was a lot to cover across these two films, James. Who'd have thought it?
It was a moment of blinding, lightning-like clarity halfway through the recording where you said, James, I think we're going to have to give this another go. Do a part 2, which I think was absolutely the right call.
I think so. So last week, of course, we talked about that incredible, monumental, sort of genre-changing, genre-defining movie from 1931. Before we get into the sequel, James, How much changed between 1931 and by the time The Bride of Frankenstein came out in 1935? That's a 4-year gap. Presumably that was really, a huge moment in time, those few years for Universal and horror movies more generally, right?
Yeah, an absolutely defining 4 years for the genre in the time between Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. If you focus in and only look at the films coming out of Universal, you have so many of these tentpole classics. I mean, you have Dracula and Frankenstein in 1931, of course. Then in 1932, you have The Mummy and The Old Dark House.
Yes.
1933 gives us The Invisible Man. 1934 is The Black Cat. And in 1935, when Universal comes out with Bride of Frankenstein, they also release Werewolf of London and The Raven.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It's a period of extraordinary activity at that particular studio. And of course, Bride of Frankenstein was to be James Whale's fourth and final horror film, his final statement for the horror film.
Wow. And
this is to say nothing of the surge of activity from all of the rival studios coming out with their competing horror products. So, an enormously, possibly overpopulated horror landscape. And, of course, this is generally considered the crowning achievement of that first wave of Hollywood horror.
I think so. And you're right. We talked last week about how it really, in some ways, to sort of quote Kim Newman, it was when horror became a genre, really, in 1931 with that double...
He's absolutely right.
Yeah, with that double hit of Dracula and Frankenstein. And so, of course, when we jump forward 4 years... audiences now know, right? Horror is really a thing. It is a lucrative thing made by all of these Hollywood studios. Boris Karloff, of course, is much more of a name, I imagine, too, by 1935.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the production code had come in. So Universal, in concocting Bride of Frankenstein, were having to navigate very carefully how to weave in all of the perversities and atrocities audiences were clamouring for.
Yes, well, that's really interesting, actually. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we go. But yeah, I find that really interesting. So, lots to cover, so let's get straight into it. Bride of Frankenstein from 1935. First of all, James, just set the scene for us. Give us a little plot synopsis for this one.
To be completely frank, Mary Shelley is getting rather bored with doing her embroidery in the company of egotistical romantic poets. She therefore decides to complete the story of Frankenstein, an unhinged extension on her original that sees her monster searching for a place in an increasingly mad world. Eventually, he demands a mate, who actually turns out to look a lot like Mary Shelley herself. But she is, of course, the Bride of Frankenstein.
Lovely, lovely.
The sort of synopsis that will make no sense to people who haven't seen the film.
It's true.
We're getting very abstract by now.
It's excellent. I love it. So first of all, James, just overall thoughts on this movie. Like you said, it is thought of as one of the beloved movies of this era, one of the beloved horror movies of all times, in a way. What do you think of Bride of Frankenstein?
I absolutely adore it, but I think because it has this enormous reputation that precedes it, I have sort of gone a bit back and forth over the years. I mean, I don't think my love for it has ever seriously waned, but I have at times thought, is it really the best horror film of that period? Is it really all that good? And like every film ever made, there are flaws in it. But, after minor deliberations, I put it on my top 10 for Sight and Sound a few years ago, and I suppose it is the most perfect distillation of everything that was going on in Hollywood horror at that time.
Yeah.
It does make for a fascinating contrast with that original film, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because I was saying last time, the original's quite a simple film in many respects, in terms of its presentation of horrors. And it's also a film flooded with natural light, natural sunlight. Whereas in the sequel, it's almost as though the sun has been put out.
Yes.
It's actually quite a rare shock on the very rare occasions when we do go out on location, I suppose, when you have scenes unfolding in that European village set from the first film.
Yes.
Yes. And it's interesting, even when you're there, James Whale frames his shots very, very carefully, so you so rarely see the sky. In fact, when you do see the sky for a more significant length of time, it's in the form of a glass painting. And when you get it in a few other shots, it's only filling a tiny corner of the frame. You can very easily miss it. So, yeah, that's a real change. And it's the pastoral quality of the original being completely swamped in all of this Gothic artifice. It's frankly almost as though the entire film's unfolding in the thunderstorm we have in that prologue with Mary Shelley.
Well, that's really interesting, right? Because I think there's something to that, and the idea of sequels, the reputation of sequels, because that is so often what people say, right? Is when it comes to sequels, you take the moment or the element of what worked so well about the first one, and then more of that, more, right? And that idea of taking that kind of, some of those kind of iconic moments from the first movie and then just cranking that up to 11 in this movie, that is a really interesting kind of early example of what sequels so often do, actually, in that regard, Yeah,
it absolutely is. I suppose the ideal, as you say, is to offer more. And I do very much adhere to the principle that, more is actually more.
Yes.
As opposed to less is more, which I think is a rather overused stock phrase. And like all overused stock phrases, it has to be scrutinized and then deconstructed. But, Bride didn't really have much competition in terms of being a Hollywood horror sequel, because there'd only really been one previously, and that was Son of Kong, coming out after King Kong. And, it completely blows Son of Kong out of the water in terms of what it's doing. It's a funny one, isn't it? I do think sequels obviously have to have some connection to what worked in the original, but it can't be a case of simply repeating it. What we have in Son of Kong is it's doing something very different to King Kong, but it does feel like less. It feels like it's now aimed at children. It feels like it was rushed incredibly quickly. And the fact it came out in 1933, the same year as the original King Kong, rather backs that up. It was a bit of a cash grab, and it's charming and quite innocent on its own level, but it in no way has the stature of the original film. Whereas I would argue that Bride of Frankenstein definitely does.
I would just want to press you more on your thoughts on this film as one of the most popular movies from this era. What is it about this movie that it makes it always kind of rank so high on lists of the best monster movies, the best Universal horror movies, the best horror sequels? Why is it that this movie particularly is so beloved by everyone, do you think?
I think one of the reasons Bride of Frankenstein sometimes incites a slight backlash is it's doing so many different things that it's no longer really a straight horror film in the way the original Frankenstein was. I always think it's less horror than an overwhelmingly mad fantasy, and in my mind, it occupies a similar place to Alice in Wonderland. We're very much in that territory. It feels like an outgrowth of that great British tradition of nonsense. But yeah, it is quite insane, quite deranged. And for me, funnily enough, that's one of my trigger points for when I start to find things horrific again. I find Alice in Wonderland rather terrifying.
Yeah,
because everyone is so insane. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's quite nightmarish in that regard.
Yeah. And, it does set me off when a film feels completely out of control. I found the substance actually very disturbing in a way that I don't think many people did, because it is so unhinged. And I think if we try and put ourselves in the shoes of 1935 cinema goers, we have to believe Bride of Frankenstein had some of that impact on people. It wasn't coldly and starkly terrifying in the way of the original Frankenstein. It was overwhelming and out of control and scary by virtue of its madness. It's a lot of the same quality the Wizard of Oz has, I think.
Yeah.
And this is all the product of James Whale not really having wanted to make another horror film, and as a result, ensuring this was his final statement on horror. His ultimate elaboration. I think if we put it in gastronomic terms, this is always how I think of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. The 1931 Frankenstein, to me, is like a beautifully, perfectly cooked steak. Whereas Bride of Frankenstein is much more like a trifle, with every conceivable ingredient stuffed in, and an awful lot of alcohol and cream.
Yes.
And you might, it's terribly exciting to ingest. You might feel slightly ill afterwards, but you will clamour for more at the next opportunity.
So it sounds to me like you think the original Frankenstein is the better film of the two. Is that right?
No, that's not true at all.
No?
I think it might, well, I'll qualify that. I think the original Frankenstein might be the better horror film.
Yes.
In fact, it is the better horror film. Whether it's the better film is obviously subjective. I do prefer Bride, but the horror element rather gets lost in the chaos of everything else going on,
Yes.
which I think is okay. And I suppose that's another point, isn't it? I think if you're watching any of these horror films from the 1930s expecting to be frightened at this 90-year remove, you're almost certainly going to be disappointed. So the fact that Bride of Frankenstein is relatively uninterested in being scary, it's helped it age rather well, because there are so many other points of interest.
I think that's right. I think that's, for me, what makes James Whale work so well generally, actually, is because in some ways his films feel less interested, at least from a modern perspective, of trying to scare us. And so instead they're so funny and grotesque and just riotously entertaining, I suppose.
Yes,
I think that's what makes them stand the test of time more. And I suppose you're right. This being his fourth and final Universal horror movie, it feels as though he's cranked up that it's like the most James Whale here, isn't it?
Absolutely,
of James Whale's movies.
It's interesting as well that Bride of Frankenstein launched this minor trend of following a relatively straight, I use the word straight advisedly, original film in a series with a gloriously gay, I use the word gay advisedly, elaboration on that original with the second film in the series. Just in terms of 1930s Universal, in 1936 they would follow up Dracula with Dracula's Daughter, a film actually originally intended for James Whale, and if we go by original story treatments and scripts, it was going to be even more outrageous than Bride, and teeming with S&M and torture and all manner of things that would never get past the censors. But in the film, the rather melancholic film we did get, there is a lesbian thread, a very memorable lesbian subtext runs through it. Anyway, flash forward to Hammer, following up the most successful film of their first wave, Dracula, with a second film, The Brides of Dracula. That's very much going down the Bride of Frankenstein route. It is extremely flamboyant and very, very colourful, and it's a world in which Christopher Lee's rather heterosexual Dracula would... it's a world in which he would be terribly ill at ease, I think, and for that reason I think he's excluded. And then if we go even further forward to the 1980s, two examples that really strike me are the second Nightmare on Elm Street film.
Yes.
The gayest horror film ever made.
Yes.
And for my money, much more entertaining than the original. And also the second Hellraiser film, Hellbound, which, again, is, I suppose, much more self-aware and ironic and elaborate. And actually, all four of those films I've just mentioned, I do enjoy more than the original.
That is interesting. That is interesting.
It's the conception of the second film in the series as, a wild party, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like you said, James, that idea of more is more when it comes to horror sequels. I love it. Let's start at the beginning. I want to ask you your thoughts on that prologue, right, where we've actually got Mary Shelley, Percy, Lord Byron. We kind of come out of the story for a moment, and we have this prologue where she says, actually, there's more to this story. I'm not finished yet, right?
I do think it a shame, Mary, to end your story quite so suddenly.
That wasn't the end at all. Would you like to hear what happened after that? I feel like telling it. It's a perfect night for mystery and horror. The air itself is filled with monsters.
I'm all ears. while heaven blasts the night without, open up your pits of hell.
Well then, imagine yourself standing by the wreckage of the mill. The fire is dying down. Soon the bare skeleton of the building will be visible, the gaunt rafters against the sky.
It's art in the extreme, isn't it? I can't really think of a more appropriate word, and it does set the mind wondering how many audiences in 1935 actually took it seriously, and how many of them saw the joke. I suppose it's fulfilling something of the same function as the prologue of the 1931 film, isn't it? Because it pays lip service again to this theme of man being punished for playing God. Mary Shelley says it this time. She says her goal was to write a moral lesson of the punishment that befell a mortal man who dared to emulate God. But it's also undercutting that, isn't it? Well, as was the prologue of the 1931 film. There with the theatrical curtain, it was a bit like the showmanship we get in Todd Browning's Freaks. It was pointing it up as, something horrifying you were about to be subjected to. With Bride of Frankenstein, this opening feels, to me at least, like an elaborate pastiche of respectable, or in my eyes, vulgar costume drama. The sort of costume drama that was considered to make up, a wholesome or slightly educational or, I suppose, elevated night of entertainment at the cinema in the 1930s. James Whale, he was always a bit frustrated in his ambitions, and it was one of the great reasons why he felt awkward about the horror label, because he loved directing horror. It's manifest from Bride of Frankenstein that he revelled in all of this stuff, but I think he would have preferred to have been associated with costume dramas and so on, just in terms of prestige.
Right, that's interesting.
He'd do things later on like The Man in the Iron Mask and The Great Garrick, which are leaning more in that direction. But
he's a bit of a kind of Robert Eggers or Ari Aster. Those people who you kind of feel like maybe kind of would rather lean towards a prestige picture than a kind of classic genre.
Yeah. And given Bride of Frankenstein is so multifaceted in what it attempts to do, you do slightly find yourself wondering that if it had been released later, would it have acquired that horrible label, elevated horror?
Right, yeah.
I think the other thing I really, really love about this prologue is it does establish on a low level Mary Shelley's absolute control over these two men. Two men who are allegedly great geniuses of English literature, but certainly in terms of the way Bride of Frankenstein presents them, they're frankly quite absurd.
Yes.
Particularly the insanely foppish Lord Byron, rolling his R's with wild abandon. And you have as a contrast Elsa Lanchester playing this version of Mary Shelley who, she's outwardly quite weak and quite feminine. She asks for candles to be lit for her. But when she pricks her finger and stands up and says she's bleeding, the two men are right there with her. She clearly has quite a lot of power over them.
Yes, yeah.
And certainly the way Elsa Lanchester plays it and the way the character is visually presented, she's smouldering with sexuality. It's very amusing to look at the first set of feedback from the censors on having viewed Bride of Frankenstein and the sorts of cuts they were suggesting, because by and large it's all the usual points. Can we eliminate this death?
Yeah.
This seems a bit gratuitous, this seems a bit gruesome. Oh, we shouldn't be able to see the heart being lifted out of the jar during the creation sequence. And then there's one point just saying, can we reduce the shots of Mary Shelley's cleavage in the opening? and it is a dress that, very handsomely emphasises her attributes.
Yes,
yes. Yeah. So that's an interesting detail, given... how Elsa Lanchester is playing it. But there is always that naughty twinkle in her eye, and
Yes.
I suppose it's all paving the way for her doppelganger return as the Bride of Frankenstein at the end of the film, where she's fully realising James Whale's vision that very pretty people have very wicked things inside of them, and if Mary Shelley can create the story of Frankenstein and all its attendant horrors, might she herself not be a sort of monster?
I love that. Yeah, that is interesting. I was going to ask you about that, actually, as to whether or not there was any kind of thematic reason, I suppose, for the double up of the casting, but I love that idea. Yeah.
There's also, it's worth pointing out, a blink and you'll miss it doubling with Una O'Connor at the start of that scene. She's walking some dogs in the very first shot.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Very peculiar. It's almost Wizard of Oz territory, where you're expecting all of the actors to have little cameos with their apparently real-world equivalents, but that does not come to pass.
So, tonally, this movie does feel like it is slightly different to the original. As soon as we begin, and we almost kind of pick up exactly where we left off, and we have the kind of the angry mob, and Frankenstein is the creature is presumed dead, and we're introduced to certain characters. Again, speaking of Una O'Connor, characters like Minnie, right? And again, there is this kind of slight and more kind of, I don't know, heightened, is that the word? Grotesque, is that the word maybe, James? Like, there is a slightly different tone, isn't there, almost from the get-go in this movie, you know?
Well, I must say, that's the best bar I ever saw in all my life. What are you crying for?
It's terrible.
I know it's terrible. But after all their murders and poor Mr. Henry being brought home to die, I'm glad to see the monster roasted to death before my very eyes. It's too good for him. It's all the devil's work. And you better cross yourself quick, Martha, before he gets you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all born of James Whale not really wanting to direct horror films anymore, but at the same time, harnessing all of the experience he'd accrued with his 3 previous horror films for Universal, and really going at this with gusto. I suppose thinking, if this is going to be my farewell to the genre, I'm going to throw absolutely everything I've learned about making this sort of film entertaining and vivid. I'm going to throw all of that on screen. So, he's synthesizing elements from his 3 previous horror films. Obviously, we have Frankenstein as the template for the basic story and characters and settings. But then, of course, his second horror film was The Old Dark House, and that's where we start to get the off-the-wall humour and all of the character eccentricities running wild. And then the year after that, he did The Invisible Man, which is full of visual spectacle. Mainly thanks to the special effects fair, but that kind of gets translated in this film into this really lush, really Baroque style. And that style is, I suppose we're in borderline operatic territory by this point, aren't we?
Right, yeah, for sure.
It's something that's very much pointed up by Franz Waxman's glorious musical score, which even has leitmotifs in operatic fashion for the Monster and the Bride and Dr. Pretorius. But the choice of actors this time round, it certainly is more flamboyant and more unhinged. I mean, we have a couple of cases where slightly more staid and plausible actors in the original film have been changed. I'm not going to say upgraded, because I think it's a matter of tone rather than the skill of the actors necessarily. But, we have Mae Clarke as Elizabeth in the original film, and I think I was saying last time she is quite a naturalistic presence. Whereas in this film we have Valerie Hobson, and she's delved a little bit, I think, into the Dwight Fry school of theatrics, in that she's always bordering on a kind of hysteria, I think, and does have moments of quite wild outbursts, and
yes. There's one real moment that she has, isn't there, where she thinks that there's something in the room with her. And it's quite something.
Has to be seen to be believed, really. And and I'm still not 100% sure what that scene is doing. We may get around to discussing it a bit more later. But we have another example of an actor being swapped out in the original film. The Burgomaster is Lionel Belmore, and he's a bit like Mr. Bumble in Oliver Twist.
Yes.
He has some amusing moments, but this time we have E.E. Clive, who's graduated from The Invisible Man to this, and I don't know, he's sort of like a character from a Carry On film, isn't he?
He is.
Impossibly English, impossibly put upon, and
that's right.
Incredibly pompous. And I think filling the void left in this film by the absence of Frederick Kerr, or Carr. Who of course had played Baron Frankenstein in 1931 and had sadly died a few years after, so he wasn't around for Bride. He would have fitted in very well in Bride, but
definitely.
Frankly, some of the characters here, I'm thinking particularly of Una O'Connor, they're so eccentric that they'd have made Frederick Carr look, I don't know, like a method actor by comparison.
Move on! You've had enough excitement for one night. This strange man you call a monster is dead. Monster, indeed. You may thank your lucky stars they sent for me to safeguard life and property.
Why didn't you safeguard those what lies drowned and murdered?
Come now. We want no rioting, no riots.
Who's rioting?
Move on. Good night all, and pleasant dreams.
Pleasant dreams yourself. Thinks he's everybody just because he's the burgomaster.
How do you find Una O'Connor in this? Like you say, she's kind of really turning things up to 11, isn't she? This as Minnie.
I do think she's a little bit overexposed. I mean, I like her. I prefer her in The Invisible Man.
Yeah, she's very funny in that.
Oh, she's fantastic, and obviously you'll be covering that later in the series.
Yes.
But I think he's served better by the script of The Invisible Man, in that her appearances are rather more carefully rationed.
Yeah.
Whereas in Bride of Frankenstein, there's a sort of 15, 20-minute stretch at the start of the film where every other line will be delivered by Una O'Connor, who's just butting her head in from some new angle or vantage point, and you're like, oh God, again, Minnie. She's like a Greek chorus almost.
Yes.
It's very, very strange. And certainly when she shrieks and caterwauls, oh God. On no account watch either The Invisible Man or Bride of Frankenstein with headphones in, because Una O'Connor will significantly reduce your hearing. She's completely out of a Carry On film, isn't she? Much like E.E. Clive. But I do have to say, having watched Bride of Frankenstein in a cinema with an audience, she does play well.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
She plays as, I think, a kind of shock absorber. One of the things I resent most as a lover of vintage cinema is when I go to a modern screening and the audience can go either way. Sometimes you have a very respectful audience who will laugh in the right places. Sometimes you have an audience who you figure out pretty early on is determined to laugh at rather than with the film.
Yes.
So it's quite helpful to have a character as exaggeratedly comical as Una O'Connor in a film like Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, I think there are all sorts of moments in Bride of Frankenstein that are legitimately funny. But I think it's quite helpful for an audience to sort of get the laughs out of their system with a character who's so obviously signposted as ridiculously comical. And frankly, whether they're laughing at or with Una O'Connor or some combination of the two, I don't mind. As long as they're not laughing at the monster going through all of his emotional tortures, I'm sort of content with that.
Yeah.
I mean, surely Una O'Connor as well. This only occurred to me on my last viewing of Bride of Frankenstein, but surely she must have been the template for Frau Blucher in Young Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly the way she's costumed. And the fact she is the servant in the Frankenstein household.
Yes, of course.
But I suppose where, Frau Blucher evokes horses whinnying, we don't get whinnying with Una O'Connor, except the whinnying she produces herself, shrieking and caterwauling. So, possibly even her screams had some sort of influence on Mel Brooks, I don't know.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. So we, after the end of the first movie, Henry Frankenstein has fallen from the windmill, presumed dead. The monster, of course, presumed dead in the fire. And then, of course, it is revealed that down in the tunnels, the creature has survived. We get that clever kind of first reveal with an arm moving once again, right? And Boris Karloff is back. How do you find the way in which this creature and this performance has evolved since the first movie? First of all, maybe let's just start with the look of the monster, the makeup. Do you see any differences or any evolution in the way that the creature looks in this movie?
Oh, it's extremely different, isn't it? It has to be said that Boris Karloff never again looked quite so perfect as the Frankenstein monster as he had in the 1931 film.
Right.
Because in that film, he really is credible as a walking corpse, as reanimated dead flesh.
Yes.
But this lines up with Karloff's situation at the time. He was basically a starving actor, and he was so cadaverous and so thin in the face.
Right.
And also the grim tone of the original Frankenstein, it serves him in, really presenting this hollow-eyed, walking dead man. Now, Karloff's face had filled out a little bit in the time since Frankenstein. He was still a very thin man, but he doesn't look nearly as sunken and as kind of withered in this film. But they've done something very, very interesting with the makeup here, which is the monster starts off very burned and very sort of wounded and grazed and all the rest of it from the trauma of going through the fire at the end of the first film.
Yes.
So a lot of his hair has been singed.
Yes.
And he is looking very, very messy and very kind of undefined. And as the film goes on, his hair grows back.
Yeah.
The makeup goes in stages and his wounds heal. And by the end, and this lines up wonderfully well with the character's emotional journey in the film, he does look rather more human by the film's end.
That is so interesting. You're right. I think that's true as well.
Yeah.
He looks less, like you say, I think maybe because he's less gaunt, less corpse-like, he looks a bit less frightening in this movie too, right? A bit more humanity. Again, it kind of fits the tone of the film a bit more, I suppose, compared to the first film. There is almost a bit less horror in him, I think, in this movie.
And when you consider how uniformly mad most of the other actors' performances, characters are in this film, Karloff's monster starts to seem rather normal by comparison. He seems like one of the last sane figures in this frankly insane world.
That's such a good point. You're right. It's like it's not even really a shock to see him in this movie compared to some of the other mad characters.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth saying that Karloff himself had very mixed views about the treatment of the character in Bride of Frankenstein. He said in interviews in later life that he thought the sympathy was potentially overdone with the monster here, which is an interesting one to think about, because the original Frankenstein, I think, is a case where they didn't quite know what they had in terms of how audiences were going to receive and react to the character of the monster. I mean, one of the reasons Bela Lugosi left the project with absolutely no regrets in 1931 is because the character of the monster on the page, obviously there's no dialogue, but it's also quite hard to glean quite how sympathetic he could be made. And with the winning combination of Karloff and Whale, it became the central feature of the original Frankenstein, that people were so disarmed and, I suppose, again, so disturbed to find themselves sympathising for this character. There's something quite modern, though, I think, about the original's relative disinterest in sympathy. Whereas in Bride of Frankenstein, it's much more self-aware. They know what they have in Karloff's monster, and they really milk opportunities to create sympathy for the character.
Yeah.
Whether that's an improvement on the original or not is again very down to individual taste. I think by and large it works beautifully in Bride of Frankenstein.
I think what's interesting, though, is despite that slightly more sentimental kind of vibe and portrayal of the creature actually kills way more people in this film than he does in the first film, right?
Yes, yeah, but it's all passed over so very, very quickly. I think in the original film he kills 3 people. Dr. Waldman and Fritz in the watchtower before he escapes, and then little Maria in the lake, obviously.
Yes.
I suppose originally he was meant to kill Frankenstein, but that, of course, didn't happen.
Right, yeah.
Decisions were eventually made. Whereas Bride of Frankenstein, I think he's killed 2 people in his first minute of screen time with little Maria's parents, whose lives are made even worse by ending so abruptly just after they've lost their daughter. And there's that dizzying mid-film montage, isn't there, which is always, I think, the part of Bride of Frankenstein people forget about. Certainly the case for me. It's between him escaping from the prison in the village and finding the blind man, where he just goes off on a rampage. And he's killed a small girl in that.
Yes.
Yes. But it happens so incredibly quickly that you don't really register it. Obviously, the monster killing a girl in the original film, it becomes
such a
the centerpiece.
moment. Yeah,
it's great. It's its greatest tragedy. Whereas in Bride of Frankenstein, you fade away, and you're then on to it's going into a house where the monster has brutalized a husband and wife, isn't it? You don't see either of them.
Yeah, again, it's the classic sequel-itis in a way, where you've got a higher body count, and you pay, to be honest, less attention, less sympathy towards the victims, and much more to the monster. That is another classic horror sequel trope.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, yeah, they're all NPCs, aren't they?
Right. Yeah.
But what happens as well when you go into that house very briefly, and the husband and wife are found? You don't really get to see them properly, but you have these moans on the soundtrack, implying they're wounded but still alive.
Frau Newman!
Frau Newman! Frau Newman!
Oh. There's another one in there! Frau Newman!
I think what originally had happened was there weren't moans on the soundtrack, so that scene played out, and you were given to understand, 2 more people the monster has killed.
Right.
So I think this is another case of Universal bowing to censorship and trying to make this very audacious film more acceptable. But and then again, at the end of the film, the monster throws Carl off the watchtower. It's Dwight Fry meeting yet another end at the hands of the Karloff monster. Certainly in the original film, the character of Carl had committed far more atrocities than he does in the actual release print. Obviously he kills a girl for her heart near the end of the film, but there was a very, very extensive subplot in the middle of the film where Carl kills his uncle for his money and pins the blame on the monster.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But at the same time, when the monster throws Carl off the watchtower, we've been given no indication that he knows that Carl deserves to die. So again, it just feels like an unmotivated killing. This film teems with them. It's very, very interesting that you have that set against trying to create sympathy for the monster. And the other thing I should say that Karloff had much graver objections to than just raising sympathy for the monster was the introduction of speech.
Yes.
He absolutely hated the speech. He described it as stupid. And yet he carries it off with such grace and such finesse and such heart.
Yeah, it certainly lends more towards that.
Yeah.
I don't know, the sort of Herman Munster kind of version of the creature almost, doesn't it? I think having him kind of say the odd word here and there or something. I can see why maybe Boris Karloff would have thought it was stupid, but I think it does.
Oh yes, yeah.
There are moments that are genuinely. I mean, again, I think it's just testament to how well Boris Karloff plays it, probably. But I think it's still really, really moving. Actually, those moments when he talks, you know,
and I think the film is wise enough to know, okay, we need some comedy moments with the monster speaking.
Yes.
And you get some of that in his, his more idyllic time with the blind hermit.
We are friends, you and I. Friends. Good. And now for a smoke. No. This is good. Smoke. You try.
Oh. Good.
We are given the moments where he's saying good,
yes,
in response to having a drink or having a smoke, and we are allowed to laugh there, and I think Karloff will have recognised this as well, and but by and large he does it so beautifully and gives it such depth and such heart, and
yeah.
I mean, funnily enough, he was to do one more film as the Frankenstein monster, Son of Frankenstein, in 1939. And there, possibly in deference to Karloff's wishes, the monster is completely mute again.
Right.
And he's a far less interesting character as a result.
That's interesting.
So I think Bride of Frankenstein had the right idea here, taking the character on that journey where he evolves. He evolves in his look, as we've said, as his hair grows back and he recovers from his wounds. He evolves. Yeah, he evolves in his look towards a kind of humanity, and he's evolved by gaining speech to a kind of humanity. And of course, at the end of the film, in his towering disillusionment, I suppose he's become his most human by that point. What more human experience than terrible disillusionment about how life has gone?
Right, and like you say, Boris Karloff in the original, he was a relatively unknown, starving actor, right? And now he is a star, right? I mean, I suppose since then we've had The Mummy, we've had Black Cat, we've had Old Dark House, various others, and he is now top billed as Karloff, right, in this movie, you know? So he is very much a star at this point, I suppose.
The question mark has been passed on to Elsa Lanchester in the credits rather than foisted on Karloff.
Right, exactly. So we have a new monster in a way. We have a new villain, I would say, of this story. And for my money, the highlight of this movie, the real star in some ways, I think, of this movie is Dr. Pretorius, right? Played by Ernest Thesiger.
You think I'm mad. Perhaps I am. But listen, Henry Frankenstein. While you were digging in your graves, piecing together dead tissues, I, my dear pupil, went for my material to the source of life. I grew my creatures, like cultures. Grew them as nature does, from seed. Our mad dream is only half realized. Alone you have created a man. Now, together, we will create his mate. You mean... Yes, a woman. That should be really interesting.
Well, this is indisputably Ernest Thesiger's finest hour in the movies, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I suppose with the original Frankenstein, Colin Clive had set the template for the Hollywood Mad Doctor. You know, you could call Colin Clive's Henry Frankenstein the classic Mad Doctor. And of course, he's back for the ride in Bride of Frankenstein. Possibly as a result of that, and given how Bride of Frankenstein in every way attempts to outdo the original,
Yes.
You have Colin Clive as Hollywood's classic Mad Doctor. So they bring in Ernest Thesiger to play Hollywood's maddest Doctor, the maddest of them all. He's a total delight, isn't he? And I think possibly the reason he's so mad is he feels so much like a stand-in for James Whale himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's constantly offering that dry, arch, detached, ironic commentary on the things going on around him.
Yes.
He's totally immoral in all of his actions. And he's also, of course, very unashamedly gay.
Right.
Not in the letter of the film, not in the text of the film, but, as subtexts go, it's, walloping you between the eyes, isn't it?
It's Dr. Pretorius. He says he wants to see the master. Most insistent.
Pretorius.
He's a very queer-looking old gentleman, sir.
Yes. Well, let me ask you about that then, because this is often considered a bit of a queer horror classic, right? Like one of the earliest, gayest horror movies in a lot of ways. James Whale himself was gay, right? And what is it about this movie? What are your thoughts, I suppose, James, on the queer and gay subtext in Bride of Frankenstein?
Well, I remember we talked about the queer or gay or camp sensibility an awful lot in relation to The Old Dark House.
Yes.
And my conclusion there, and it's the same now, is it's extremely hard to pin down. PhDs and books have been devoted to this subject, and I still don't think we're that much nearer to really figuring out precisely what it is. The queer or camp style, it can play out in a very sincere key, as with the sympathy for outsiders, and we get so much of that with the way Karloff's monster is presented, and even down to things like James Whale saying he cast Boris Karloff because of his queer, penetrating personality.
Yes.
He meant queer with a small q rather than a large, but
yeah.
There is still that overlap between sympathy for outsiders and the queer squint, as I suppose we might call it. So it can be very sincere, but it can also be very insincere, as with a character like the devilish Dr. Pretorius, where, the implication that he's this bitter, twisted, but really rather fun older gay man.
Yeah.
It's given him a distance from ordinary human affairs, and, he sort of looks down like a satanic god on how all the little people are behaving. I mean, quite literally, with his homunculi, he has all these little people he's presiding over. And actually, in that scene, comparing himself to the devil. So we have the queer or camp style in sincere and insincere keys, but, we also have the sheer unbridled style of a film like Bride of Frankenstein. Throughout the film is so lushly appointed and so baroque and so theatrical and so flamboyant. And, of course, it all builds up to unveiling a major new monster who, rather than the beautifully brutish figure we have in the original film, it's this very glamorous woman in sort of Hollywood makeup with fabulous hair.
Yeah.
So, it's this film can definitely be enjoyed as a queer horror classic. There's so much of it there.
Yeah.
You don't need to be looking at it through that lens. But I think it does add another layer. It also has to be said that this is a film that, narrative-wise, revolves around two different sorts of close male bonds. If we're reaching a bit, we might almost refer to them as gay marriages.
Right.
So we have Frankenstein and Pretorius getting together to create life in a fashion that doesn't involve a woman in any way at all. And actually, when they do get together, it's a very provocative scene in a way, because Frankenstein is literally deserting his marital bed in order to join forces with Pretorius. And, Elizabeth has been banished from the room. So we have that unhealthily close male bond. But we also have the monster and the blind hermit, who set up house together and live quite happily in the forest until, the interfering villagers get involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have again that swing from the insincere to the sincere, or from the devilish to the more angelic. We have the horrible union of Frankenstein and Pretorius, which brings nothing but grief, and we have this sunny and innocent union between the monster and the hermit. Although, actually, there is one quite, to me, objectionable reading of the monster and hermit sequence, which suggests even that isn't so innocent, which is some people have read the final shot when you have that quite distracting glowing crucifix at the top of the frame and the hermit is weeping over the monster. Some people have read that shot as being composed to make it look like the hermit is performing some manner of oral service on the monster.
Wow.
I think this is going a bit far. I think this is where a reading becomes an over-reading, and I so hope it's not true. I don't think it is. It would put too much of a dampener on that very, very heartfelt sequence.
Right, yeah. Well, coming back to Pretorius for a second, I want to talk about as well that incredible scene when he shows off his creations, his homunculi, right? The little figures inside the glass jars. Because again, I think this is an incredible evolution in directorial style for James Whale, I think, as well, in that we talked about how brilliant the visuals were for 1931 in Frankenstein. And again, he's really one-upped himself here in this, right? Just the pure visual magic, I suppose, that we get on screen. I love that scene with the homunculi, you know?
I enjoy it very much too. For viewers who object to this film straying too far from horror, I think that is the moment at which it becomes a lost cause.
Yeah.
Because you are in total Alice in Wonderland territory by that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all the business of the eat me, drink me potions and biscuits that make you grow in size or diminish to, the tiny size of a homunculi here. It is arguably a bit too silly.
Yes.
In fact, it does invite an awful lot of questions for me. I mean, obviously Pretorius has created these creatures, but I find it hard to believe that in the process of creating them, they emerged. He talks about creating them from seed, doesn't he? I find it very hard to believe they emerged fully dressed, which rather to me suggests that Pretorius is tailoring these little costumes for them and allowing them to cosplay in their bottles. He's sort of looking at them and saying, "Oh yes, you look like a king. I shall prepare for you a little king costume."
Yeah.
It's making me think of that. Oh God, that other stereotype you get of gay men as collecting dolls.
Oh,
you
God,
think of
yeah.
Smithers in The Simpsons and his Malibu Stacy collection. This is essentially Dr. Pretorius's doll collection, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an interesting scene as well in terms of giving us some insight into the different nature of Pretorius's mad science. So in counterbalance to the emphasis on electrical machinery in the original and how Frankenstein creates his monster, this is all black magic, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Well, if you listen to Colin Clive and how he says it in his very particular accent, it's black magic.
Yes.
Yes. and it does take us into much more fantastical territory.
Right.
And,
yeah.
I think again connects us back to the silent film. This is much more like the recourse to the occult to bring life into the world that you had in films like The Golem and
yes.
and The Magician.
Yes, and even those visuals look a bit Georges Méliès or something, I think, as well.
Yeah,
they,
yeah. Although, yeah. I mean, obviously, Méliès, we're looking back in cinema history, but this scene is actually looking forward a little bit as well, in that it did bring about a tiny little subgenre within the mad science subgenre, revolving around the creation of these little people. I mean, the next year, MGM released The Devil Doll, which, for my money, is Todd Browning's greatest sound film. I prefer it to Dracula, I prefer it to Freaks.
Yeah.
I even prefer it to Mark of the Vampire, which I love dearly, because it's so much fun. And it has Lionel Barrymore in drag, sort of Mrs. Doubtfire-style drag, unleashing these tiny little people on the world to do his bidding. It's so much fun. Everyone should see The Devil Doll.
God,
and then a few years after, Dr. Cyclops was released, and that's a very important mad science film. Well, very important horror film. It's the very first horror film in free strip Technicolor.
Right, yeah.
And again, it's full of these wonderfully pleasing special effects of little people running around. And obviously a lot later on you get the incredible shrinking man.
Yeah.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's I think Bride of Frankenstein is sort of where it begins, though.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It is this kind of really interesting blend of kind of fantasy with horror here, isn't it? Yeah. There is so much packed into this movie. And I want to talk a little bit about the sort of the pathos, I suppose, as well, and those moments of real heart. And let's just go back to talking about that middle section where we've got the creature coming across the blind man in the cottage, right, and him learning to speak. And again, it's an incredibly sweet, kind of wholesome, tender moment in this horror film, isn't it? How do you find that section of the story?
To me, it's absolutely wonderful. I think it works so beautifully, and I find it so deeply touching. And I actually find I cry more easily at it with the passage of time. Every time I return to Bride of Frankenstein, I think, oh, it's not going to get me this time. But actually, it's getting me more now. I don't quite know what's happening to me at the moment. It's so affecting, and it's done with such sincerity. And I know some people say, oh, I can't watch that scene anymore because I've seen Young Frankenstein. I'm just thinking of Gene Hackman and all of the knockabout business where he's setting fire to the monster's fingers and pouring hot soup into his lap and all of that.
Yeah.
But, as I think I said earlier, this film does account for audiences maybe wanting to have a laugh. The morning after scene with the hermit and the monster, we have lots of moments which are legitimately and intentionally funny.
Yeah.
But the first meeting is a sort of religious experience. I mean, it's made very blatantly religious. The way the hermit is dressed, he looks like Saint Jerome or some other bearded prophet. And, you even have Ave Maria playing on the soundtrack. It's so audacious that were the film makers less skilled, it would teeter into absolute self-parody, but it stays just the right side of the line to me. And I think possibly the reason it is so touching is it suddenly makes sense of the uniform insanity of the rest of the film. The film is a storm, it's a chaos of insanity, and then in that meeting of the blind man and the monster, you've come to the still centre of the storm. And you have, I think for the only time in the film, two characters who are bleedingly sincere.
Yeah.
And they just come together and it's, oh God, it's so beautiful.
It is.
I have no cynicism about that sequence at all.
No.
Our Father, I thank thee, that in thy great mercy thou hast taken pity on my great loneliness, and now out of the silence of the night hast brought two of thy lonely children together, and sent me a friend to be a light to mine eyes and a comfort in time of trouble. Amen.
Heggie is such a fine actor. It's the way he delivers the line just before breaking down, saying, to be a light to mine eyes and a comfort in times of trouble. Amen.
Yeah.
He nearly doesn't get the words out and then he bows his head down. And then you cut to that shot of the monster and a tear rolls down his cheek.
Yeah.
And as audacious as Bride of Frankenstein is in its operatic and Baroque flourishes, that to me is the single most audacious moment in the film.
Mm-hmm.
You go back 4 years and you have people hiding under their seats at this living dead man, this terrifying monster. And then you go forward 4 years and Karloff and Whale are brave enough to have the monster cry. It's astonishing. And I think such an illustration of how people took the monster to their hearts as a character and saw beyond the horror. And it acquired a life of its own, which then feeds back into the sequel. How do you feel about this sequence?
Yeah, exactly the same as you. I think it's beautiful. It's moving. It reminds me of that kind of middle section of the book too, which I find really is my favourite section of the book, and it's incredibly moving as well. And it is. It's amazing when you consider how over the top and grotesque and hilarious this movie is at parts, that it does take the time to be, for this kind of beautiful moment in the middle, and it works. All of those all of those tones and vibes work in this little 70-minute movie so well, don't they? I think that's such a triumph. Yeah,
very Dickensian, really. This film paints big in the way that Charles Dickens does, in the alternation between the grotesque characters and the wild and outlandish characters. And yeah, as I say, these characters are just bleedingly sincere.
Yeah.
But this film, like Dickens, it believes equally in all of them and somehow is able to pull it off as a result. It's astonishing.
Meanwhile, you've got Pretorius off, sort of breaking in the crypts and stealing graves and this kind of thing, right? With Carl and Ludwig.
Yes.
And that amazing moment when he decides to just stay with the grave and has some supper and has some wine.
I rather like this place.
Incredible.
I can relate. I mean, when the production design is by Universal. Yeah.
Oh my
Who
God!
would want to have a drink and blow smoke over a skull in that palatial setting?
It's the kind of thing these days that press and influencers would get invited to. Come and hang out in a crypt and get free booze. It's like it's perfect. And then of course the Pretorius and the monster meet as well.
Yes.
And again, like you've mentioned already, James, but these moments are wonderful too, aren't they? I think I love the moments between Pretorius and the monster. It's an embarrassment of riches. I think all of these different kind of pairings of different style of performers and these different larger than life characters coming together. I think I
think the thing I love best about the meeting of Pretorius and the monster is Pretorius's response to seeing this being who, as we're told elsewhere, has been murdering half the countryside and is the terror of everyone. Pretorius looks round, sees the Frankenstein monster in a crypt, and just sort of raises an eyebrow and says, "Oh, I thought I was alone.
Yeah.
Good evening."
Oh, I thought I was alone. Good evening.
Smoke? Friend?
Yes, I hope so. Have a cigar. They're my only weakness.
I mean, in common with the hermit, he's, I think, basically the only character in the film who isn't terrified when he encounters the monster.
Right, yeah.
Of course, the hermit can't see him, so that's his excuse. But Pretorius is, again, in his sort of devilish god persona. He's just so far above and so far removed from ordinary human concerns that he's unflappable in the face of his fiend. And that scene as a result becomes a very dark rewriting of the bond formed just previously between the monster and the blind man.
Right,
the monster has passed from innocence to experience, disillusionment is gathering, and he's willing to go along with Pretorius.
I love that. Yeah, that is so true. And then, meanwhile, we've got Elizabeth. You've already touched upon this, but Elizabeth, as played by Valerie Hobson in this movie. What do you... I want to come back to that strange scene, James, where she has a bit of a meltdown in her bed when she thinks that there is something in the room with her or something. Right? What do you make of that scene?
I'm still not entirely sure. But I wonder if that scene is the reason that we got Valerie Hobson rather than May Clark. I can't imagine May Clark... Well, we have a sort of little version of that in the original Frankenstein when she's recovering from the monster having come through the window on her wedding day. But she's in a very low-energy daze there, saying, "Don't let it come here, don't let it come here." Whereas what we get with Valerie Hobson, it's, we're in the territory of grand opera again.
While you've been lying here tossing in your delirium, I couldn't sleep. And when you raved of your insane desire to create living men from the dust of the dead, a strange apparition has seemed to appear in the room. It comes, a figure like death, and each time it comes more clearly, nearer. It seems to be reaching out for you, as if it would take you away from me. There it is. Look, there.
I see nothing, Elizabeth. Where? There's nothing.
There. It's coming for you. Nearer. Henry.
it's meant to be a portent of death she's seeing, isn't it?
Yes.
It comes a figure like death, and then she goes into outright hysterics, and just after she's been fearful of a figure of death arriving, Dr. Pretorius is up the door. So I suppose if she was having a psychic intimation of anything, it was the arrival of evil and the threat to her marriage represented by Dr. Septimus Pretorius. May Clark was actually very upset not to be brought back as Elizabeth.
Oh,
she
really?
loved James Whale, and she loved James Whale. She'd obviously been in Waterloo Bridge for Whale, and did a few other films.
It wasn't her choice not to come back then.
Well, her star was fading a bit. I mean, the careers of leading ladies were so incredibly brief. But she was still willing to do it, and Valerie Hobson came on board instead. But I think that's just an instance of Whale perceiving that this particular actress was a better fit for the stylistic direction he'd gone in with this film.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like the movie, how much do we care / how much are we invested in Henry Frankenstein and Elizabeth, right? I mean, we've barely actually talked about Colin Clive himself, right? Frankenstein in this movie. It almost feels a little bit, he feels a little bit less important, less in the spotlight to me in this movie.
Yeah, and he's no longer really being framed as the film's romantic hero.
No.
There's a great long stretch in the middle of the film where he's disappeared entirely because we're focusing on the monster. And I think partly because Clive had sustained a leg injury, he's much more sedentary when we do see him. He's usually sat down or in bed.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is the thing that Frankenstein does an awful lot of in the novel. He's constantly in bed. He's constantly convalescing. And I think actually in line with Mary Shelley's original Frankenstein, he feels close to that character this time round. He
does.
Tormented and regretful. And There's a slight flavour of the irritating direction Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman went in the sequels, where he's just moaning in every scene about what an awful life he has. But he is no longer the romantic hero on that basis. The self-pitying quality innate in Clive has really come to the fore. And this film, in common with the original Frankenstein, was meant to end with Frankenstein's death.
Right.
And again, Clive was really keen it would, and again, Universal went off in a different direction at the last minute.
That's so strange.
Yeah. But if you look at the wide shot of the lab being blown up at the end of the film, you can see Colin Clive, or at least a Colin Clive lookalike stunt double, against the wall of the lab.
Right.
So he's still in the film being killed, even though he's on a hillside at a safe distance watching it with Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. But this is a film where arguably he does deserve to suffer retribution.
Yeah.
He's had a very narrow escape in the original, an original that let him off the hook to a great extent. It would, to me, have wrapped things up nicely to have had him suffer. But,
and I suppose, like Frankenstein in Shelley's novel, he is, like you say, he's extremely tormented in this film. He is so reluctant. Yeah. Obviously, he doesn't want to create the mate, just like Frankenstein just like Frankenstein in the novel. Only this time we've got Pretorius, who is making it happen, right? Essentially, and concocts a scheme essentially to just kidnap Elizabeth, right, in order to get him get him to help. And I think, again, like the final sort of 20-25 minutes of this film, where we've got the preparations, I suppose, for the bride, is some of the best stuff. Yeah. I love him sending Carl off to find a fresh heart as well. Like, all of that stuff, brilliant. I love it all. It's great fun.
It's so wonderful that Dwight Frye's been brought back as a different character, but in a basically equivalent role.
Yeah, and again, like, what's the reason behind that, do you think? Why have we got Dwight Frye back as a different character here?
Well, it's weird to look at with modern eyes, isn't it? Because you would never be able to do that in a sequel to a film today, where you brought back... I mean, unless they were doing an Andy Serkis type thing, where they were covered in CGI and literally definitively unrecognizable. You would never get a sequel today that brought back an actor in the original film, but in a different part.
Right.
We're very pedantic about these things now. I think possibly George Lucas is to blame for this, where he's so pedantic he went back for all the Star Wars films and tried to calibrate them to make them fit with the prequels he'd done and all that kind of thing. But I suppose this is James Whale drawing on his theatrical background, the idea of a rep company.
Right.
And he really liked Dwight Frye. He liked the eccentricity and the madness he brought to his parts. He'd given him a very small part in The Invisible Man as well, but yeah, it is peculiar that he's back in a virtually in pretty well the same kind of role. But I suppose that's also part and parcel of this film offering a more is more. Let's give him an encore. So what that he was killed in the prior film? We'll bring him back. Like we've brought back the monster. We'll give him a new character and we'll give him lots of the classic Dwight Frye business to get up to.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And whereas he did seem incredibly and dangerously mad in the original Frankenstein, he's just part of the tapestry in Bride. He's in key and not quite as insane as Dr. Pretorius, who of course is his employer.
That's right. He's a different kind of insane in this, isn't he? He is. But
he's a downtrodden insane. He's not enjoying himself as much now.
That's right. But
although there are glimmers. I mean, he's very reluctant when he has to go off and find the heart, but he's very keen blurting out later in the lab. It was a very fresh one.
Yeah. With his grin. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then what does it? He sort of says, Frankenstein's like, where did you get this, right? And Pretorius has to like mouth something to him,
Yes.
It's like,
how does it go?
Police, something to do with police.
It was a police case.
Yeah. It's so good.
It's beating perfectly, just as in life. Oh, if only I can keep it going until it was a very fresh one. Where did you get it? I gave the gendarme 50 crowns. What gendarme? It was a police case.
Yes, very sad, only we can't bother about that now. Can I do anything?
No. I can work better alone.
Yeah, let's talk about the creation scene then, finally. And I love this kind of bookend idea, if you double bill the first and second movie together, that we almost begin and end with these creation scenes, really, don't we, in the lab?
This is a very interesting point, isn't it? Because, of course, one of the most celebrated sequels of all is Evil Dead 2.
Yes.
In terms of being the second installment in a series. And the thing everyone always points out about Evil Dead 2 is, it's essentially telling exactly the same story as the original.
Yes, it's basically a remake, Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein is also doing that, but it's telling the same story as the original in reverse.
You're right.
So we open with the burning mill.
Yeah.
Then we have the intermediate scenes of the monster on the run and
the angry mob and
being persecuted. And then we no longer start in the Watchtower with the creation. We end in the Watchtower with the creation.
Yes. I love that.
And life is created again, but there's also death in the Watchtower this time.
Because they're both so wonderful and short, they make for an amazing double bill, actually. You can so easily watch Frankenstein and Bride just back to back, basically, can't you?
I did that a few days ago, and it is a bit of a shock when you get to Bride with the tone shift, but certainly time-wise they go together very well. Oh, and isn't it exciting as well when we finally get to the Watchtower in this film, having had all that build-up? I got very much the same feeling when I got round to Doctor Sleep, and of course the climax of that film is finally getting back to the Overlook Hotel from The Shining, and I think this would have had a similar impact on 1935 cinema goers, where the Watchtower in the original Frankenstein, even in those 4 years, it built it'd been built up in their heads. It had acquired such a mythic stature.
Right.
The place where Frankenstein did it, where he had all his electrical machinery and brought life to the monster. So, it's really, really thrilling when we finally get to the Watchtower in Bride of Frankenstein.
And it's interesting because we talked a lot about how this movie deals more in almost sort of fantasy and black magic and that kind of thing. But interestingly, with the sort of creation scene, we actually get a bit more sort of pseudo-science behind how this works, right? As in, we have the kites and the lightning and all of that.
Yes,
Like we almost get a little bit. And I remember you talking about this last week about how, you actually loved that kind of the mystery, I suppose, of how the science works in the original. Whereas this actually reveals a little bit more, right, of how this works.
Well, it's heightened in every sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's spatially heightened. I mean, the tower was always an incredibly vertical space, but now it's got this little metal scaffold on top. So the gurney bearing the body of the bride can be borne even higher into the heavens. And, as if that wasn't enough, there are little kites as additions to that. So, the Watchtower is aspiring even more vertically via the kites, attracting the lightning. It's also heightened in terms of the visual qualities of the photography, isn't it?
Yes.
In that the contrast of the image, especially when the bride is being brought to life, the contrasting blacks and whites, the chiaroscuro, they're pushed to such extremes. I mean, you have close-ups of both Frankenstein and Pretorius in that sequence where they almost look like etchings. It doesn't look like the black and white photography in the rest of the film anymore. I suppose it's most heightened just in terms of the editing and the montage and the accumulation of shots as the monster's mate is being brought to life. It's heightened in every regard.
It's coming up!
And another area where the sequence is heightened is just for sound.
Yes.
You'd have the cacophony of thunder in the original film, and now it's cranked up to even greater extremes. I think slightly too much so, actually, because you struggled to hear Franz Waxman's musical score there, and that is the most beautiful, most brilliant, dramatic passage in that musical score. I entreat everyone to go and find one of the modern symphonic recordings of the creation by Waxman for Bride of Frankenstein, because it's basically my favourite ever piece of film music.
Oh, wow.
But you can't quite hear it all the way through here. And that to me is a bit ironic, because Bride of Frankenstein had an Oscar nomination.
Yes.
And it's the only Oscar nomination it had, and it is in the category of Best Sound.
Yes.
Now, when you consider how this film has outlasted so many other films from 1935 and is so brilliant in every department, it's a bit of a slap in the face that its only Oscar nomination was for Best Sound, which I contend is not perfect on the basis of the creation sequence.
That's interesting.
Maybe that's why I didn't win Best Sound. I don't think it is.
Well,
but it's the only horror film Universal did in the 30s and 40s in black and white that got an Oscar nomination.
Wow.
And it's for Best Sound. It feels
that is so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And actually, there's a lot more music in this film. There's a lot more of a score in this movie than there was the original, actually, as well. It's something we haven't talked about, of course.
Yeah,
but there is a kind of, everyone will talk about the actual bride entering moment in a minute, but that music particularly, right? People really remember this film for its music. Yeah.
Oh, it's magnificent. And again, if you listen to it out of context, it doesn't sound like a traditional horror film score.
Yeah.
I mean, at the relatively early point of 1935, you didn't really have a traditional horror film score. I mean, you'd had Max Steiner doing King Kong.
Yeah.
And Universal in The Black Cat the previous year, 1934. They'd had a very elaborate soundtrack there, but in that case, it's mainly comprised of different arrangements of classical pieces.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there is an argument to be put forward for Bride of Frankenstein as, I suppose the first great score to a Hollywood Gothic film. I mean, the lovely musical score to Vampire has come back into my head, and that's from a few years earlier, but not a Hollywood film. And yeah, I mean, King Kong, to me, it's a great horror film, and it's a great score, but it's not really a Gothic, is it? It's more of an adventure film. It's more of a rollicking ride. But yeah, the Bride of Frankenstein score is gorgeous stuff.
Incredible.
And,
yeah.
Just as wild as the source. And this is a film that suits a musical score in a way that the original Frankenstein, I don't think, would have suited a musical score particularly.
Right.
You don't really notice the lack of a musical score in the original Frankenstein because it has such control over all the other sound effects in terms of creating an atmosphere, and also the use of silence.
Yeah.
Whereas Bride of Frankenstein being conceived on the scale of grand opera, it really benefits from having an appropriately operatic musical score.
Yeah, agreed. So, James, we're an hour and a half into this conversation. We're talking about 55 minutes into this 70-minute film where we can finally talk about the Bride of Frankenstein in Bride of Frankenstein, right?
We'll have to be quick. She's not there for long.
Exactly.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
Interesting, right, that Pretorius calls her the Bride of Frankenstein, because she's not technically, right? She's bride of the creature of Frankenstein, I suppose, but, doesn't have quite the ring to it, I suppose.
I mean, possibly another reason May Clark was upset not to be cast as Elizabeth in this film is if you've not engaged with it too closely, you can start to perceive Elizabeth as being the title character.
Right.
She is the literal Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Sidebar, I once got into... I think this went on for weeks. Someone had put on Wikipedia that the title of Bride of Frankenstein technically and actually refers to Elizabeth.
Oh.
I was editing it for weeks trying to get rid of this error. Someone kept putting it back on. It was very frustrating. So I just want to say on this podcast, the title, Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes.
And it is Bride of Frankenstein. It's not The Bride of Frankenstein. It says that on all the posters for some reason. But if you look at the main titles, Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
It's referring to the female monster. It's referring to the Elsa Lanchester character at the end.
Yes.
And don't let Wikipedia tell you otherwise. Sorry, what were we talking about?
I love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about the bride herself then.
Sad lives we lead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, what an incredible, iconic moment, considering it is such a brief moment at the very end of this film, right? But what are your thoughts, James, on Elsa Lanchester and the awakening, I suppose, of the bride?
I think it has to be said that there's quite a bit of lineage from Metropolis in how the bride is presented. In Metropolis, you have Brigitte Helm, a bit like Elsa Lanchester in this film, playing a doppelganger character. She's both Maria and a fiendish robot who is made to look exactly like Maria. And it's in that second guise as the robot that I think Helm very much lines up with how Lanchester plays the bride. Because Helm gives the false Maria, the robotic Maria, this really jerky, staccato body language.
That's right.
It's high German expressionism. And if you look at how Elsa Lanchester is moving, it's likewise very jerky and very staccato. It's very stop-start in its rhythms. She'll freeze and then darting motions. Funnily enough, you also have in Metropolis Helm's false Maria encouraging the workers in the underground city to pull a lever which brings destruction to the underground city. I wonder if that fed into the lever we're about to get in Bride of Frankenstein as the climax of the film.
Yeah.
Peculiar little detail. But we have Lanchester playing the Bride of Frankenstein with that very pronounced body language, and also bringing to the character some of her own customary weirdness, particularly in the form of that hiss.
Yes.
Which she said she had borrowed from the swans at Regent's Park in London. When you got too close to them, they would hiss.
Yeah, because there is something a bit animal-like about her, actually, in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have in The Bride these totally fantastical details, and I think these very much line up with Elsa Lanchester's acting tendencies. She was obviously the wife of Charles Laughton. They were in that very strange lavender marriage together. And Laughton at that period, in the mid-1930s, he was being unanimously acclaimed as one of the greatest living actors, one of the greatest actors in the world. Now, it's always tricky when two actors get together. I can't imagine how difficult it must be if your spouse is being acclaimed as a genius and you're just seen as this funny little person by comparison, this eccentric. And I think as a result, Lanchester often played up the eccentricity in her parts, partly also to draw some attention to herself. And, it could backfire sometimes, but at its best, I adore Lanchester's eccentricity. I recently caught her in a film of the 1940s called Ladies in Retirement, which, despite that resoundingly dull title, is essentially a great horror film. It's fantastic. It's really atmospheric. And Lanchester is at her most Lanchester in that. She's so crazed and so wild and so off the wall in her choices. And she's sublime as the Bride of Frankenstein. It's a tiny, tiny part, but she makes it so memorable with her choices. And the hiss, it's so horrible. And the screams, actually. It's partly the way they're woven in, but and the angles at which Lanchester's face is shot during them. But they work on me as jump scares, nearly.
Yeah, they do.
They really are frightening.
Yeah. And again, actually, props to the Oscar-nominated sound design for that. Actually, 'cause there are some kind of there's that really iconic kind of scream that has this kind of reverb on it as well. Right?
Oh yeah,
it does work really well. Yeah. The look of her as well. Again, considering she's on screen for all of about 8 minutes or something, right? It's unbelievable that I think you could ask a room of people, and I think the majority of them would recognize The Bride of Frankenstein, right? I think there is something that has just permeated across culture, popular culture, about that particular monster as well, and the look of her as well. I think it's incredible, the hair, the white dress, the stitches and everything. It's just, it really has kind of stood the test of time, I think, hasn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. She cuts a very elegant, clean, white figure in contrast to the original Frankenstein monster, who is a bit of a down and out and in very dark, very heavy costume. And I suppose within the logic of the film, if Bride of Frankenstein does indeed have an internal logic, this might reflect Dr. Pretorius's different method. Because, of course, she's been brought about with the synthesis of Frankenstein's method and Pretorius's, and he of course has created these delicate, graceful little people in jars, and I think he says earlier on in the film that size has been his problem, and he needs Frankenstein's help to work on that. So you get this sense that she is made up of various different corpses, certainly as we know from The Stolen Heart, but she represents an advance on what has gone before, and it is incredible how iconic a figure the Bride of Frankenstein has become, given she only has a few minutes on screen. If you go to the next year, I mean, there was a terrible poverty of great female monsters in Hollywood at this time. I think the only other one we really got in the 1930s, certainly in Hollywood, was the next year, Dracula's Daughter. And Gloria Holden does the honours there, and she delivers, what for my money is still the greatest female performance of all time in terms of the acting. However, that film has none of the iconic imagery that we get compressed into just a few minutes of Elsa Lanchester as the Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
It's an incredible achievement. And, of course, some people are very disappointed when they come to Bride of Frankenstein that she is so fleetingly featured. But I kind of like it. I don't know whether Lanchester's characterization would have sustained a longer film. I mean, we'll never find out, so it's just one of those imaginative games you can play, isn't it? But I really like that the bride herself becomes a punchline at the end of this very tall tale. The whole narrative of Bride... I mean, the film's called Bride of Frankenstein, and, in that light, the entire narrative becomes this shaggy dog story that ends on this black comedy coda, this sick joke that, ha-ha, she doesn't love him. She won't be the Bride of Frankenstein. She's had... I mean, I suppose building on the low-key suggestions of Mary Shelley's control in the prologue, here is a female who, in theory, is being given no agency. She's been brought to life expressly to be wed to a man.
Right.
But she exercises her free will to say, no, I'm not going along with that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And... you have that later film, don't you? The Bride from 1985. It purports to kind of start off where Bride of Frankenstein finishes, with the creation of a female monster. But it I don't know, it feels a bit like fan fiction, really. It's a what-if scenario of if she survived beyond her creation and what would have happened then. And it's a film that's interesting in some respects, but to me it sort of confirms that extending that character story, it doesn't really work.
No.
I mean, The Bride feels weirdly traditional. It feels closer in a way to Mary Shelley's novel. And I think if you're to run with a character as outrageous as The Bride of Frankenstein, it has to be a film that is similarly outrageous. I mean, I suppose you could say Poor Things was a modern Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Not
definitely.
in terms of being that similar to the 1935 film Bride of Frankenstein, but it is outlandish and it is wild, and I'm sure Poor Things impacted modern audiences much as Bride of Frankenstein impacted 1935 audiences.
Yeah.
Where your garden variety film goer, probably couldn't believe what they were seeing in this film. Par for the course with what you and I watch on a daily basis, Mike.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's incredible. It's how much it stood the test of time, and it's I mean, it's like you say, it's a kind of punchline, but it's tragic. Again, we get back to the kind of the tragedy of Frankenstein's creature here, where he is once again rejected, right, and treated with fear and repulsion by a fellow monster, by a fellow corpse, essentially. And it is sad. She hates me. It's so sad, that bit.
And again, I mean, I think that is his most human moment. It's for me the point at which he becomes a fully rounded human being in becoming that disillusioned. And he retains his nobility and his dignity in a sense by condemning himself and the bride to death. It's he recognizes there is never going to be a way I can fit happily into this world. I'm sorry this happened.
Yes, go. You live. Go. You stay. We belong dead.
And yet he still decides to save his creator, right? He tells Henry Frankenstein and his bride to escape, but he tells Pretorius to stay, the creature. You stay. And pulls this very dangerous, James, very dangerous lever, as it turns out, which just blows up the entire place.
You'll blow us all to atoms. Yeah.
There's something a bit kind of Looney Tunes or Acme about that lever,
Yeah. Although, you have just such a lever in Metropolis, in the underground city, and no one ever has a go at Metropolis about the lever. It's only
true.
Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, I imagine all the machinery is in a very delicate state after the creation, so maybe things are apt to detonate if the wrong button is pressed or the wrong lever is pulled. I think the oddity is that the monster seems to realise that this is the lever that will destroy the lab, but possibly another lever would have accomplished the same end.
That's true.
It's just come into my head as well that, the year earlier, the Black Cat also ends with a lever being pulled and the house being blown up. The house of Karloff's Satanist is blown up by Lugosi's Vitus Verdigast. And, when he pulls the lever and ignites the dynamite. So, possibly it was also ported over from that. I don't know. But, you do have the decision that Frankenstein live, whereas the incredibly flamboyant and charismatic gay character has to die. I partly wonder if that was an aspect of it, but quite apart from being queer-coded, Pretorius is totally beyond redemption. He's just a lot of fun to spend time with. But obviously in the original cut of this film, Frankenstein was to die. I suppose maybe they thought Elizabeth would be lonely and the odd audience member would feel regretful that they couldn't have their wedding and Elizabeth couldn't become the official Bride of Frankenstein. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, we also have an earlier story idea, which I don't think was ever taken much further. But they certainly toyed with the idea that Elizabeth would have been killed by the monster, and it would have been her heart transplanted into the bride. You occasionally get people, I think, overreading how Elsa Lanchester plays that scene as though, Elizabeth's heart is in her body and therefore she looks at Frankenstein with something approaching romantic longing or a familiarity. I don't think that's the case because they never took this idea further. But Frankenstein and Elizabeth live. Pretorius, the bride and the monster, they're all destroyed.
Yeah.
In very apocalyptic fashion.
Yeah. And then in a gloriously abrupt ending, that's it, really, isn't it? That's it. The place blows up and we get the end card, essentially. Wasting not a minute of this movie wasted, right? I love it.
No, absolutely not.
Oh, man. Well, there you go. How do you think this movie... God, it's 90 this year, right? Thinking about it.
Astonishing to think.
It is astonishing to think, because obviously, right, James, this film holds up, I think, remarkably well.
I don't even know where to begin. I think I've said it all by this point.
Well, let me ask you a difficult final question. Maybe difficult, maybe not.
Right.
Is this the greatest Universal monster movie?
Yeah, I think we can safely say that. It's not necessarily the greatest Universal horror movie, because I think there are entries in the Universal canon which are much more overtly frightening. I would say the original Frankenstein is probably a greater horror film. I would say the same of The Black Cat. But monster movies aren't just about scaring us, especially when they're 90 years old. They're also about the pathos and the tragedy. They're also about the style. They're also about sheer entertainment.
Yeah.
So the fact that in this film you have Karloff going on this victory lap as his most famous character, the Frankenstein monster, and extending on and developing it in so many brilliant ways. And on top of that, you have introduced a second iconic monster. Yeah, I think without a shadow of a doubt, this is the greatest Universal monster movie. Yeah.
I would agree with you. And just briefly, James, tell us what became of Frankenstein movies beyond this in the Universal era. You've mentioned a couple of times Son of Frankenstein in 1939. We've got Ghost of Frankenstein, right? I believe,
yes.
1942.
Yeah.
Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein. What are your thoughts just generally? Do any of the subsequent films kind of match up to these first two?
Well, as you mentioned there, Mike, there were loads and loads of these Frankenstein films, 8 in total from Universal across the 30s and 40s. For me, the only film in the series that really stacks up against the James Whale films is the third series entry, Son of Frankenstein, which I think is absolutely magnificent. Certainly to a modern film viewer, I think Son of Frankenstein is probably much more engaging and much more enjoyable than the original 1931 Frankenstein. In fact, for quite some time, I preferred Son of Frankenstein to the original Frankenstein. I've gotten better now, and I prefer the original. But yeah, it's a wildly entertaining film. And if you look at Young Frankenstein, it's more closely patterned on Son of Frankenstein than any other film in the Universal series.
Right.
And it's full of all manner of incidental delights. You know, you get the bonus of Boris Karloff's final portrayal as the monster. You have superbly vivid supporting performances from Bela Lugosi as Igor and Lionel Atwill as the one-armed Inspector Krogh. And actually, if you look at that film visually, if you look at that film stylistically, it's actually even more extreme than Bride of Frankenstein. It's reaching all the way back to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in terms of really going full-on German expressionism. So, yeah, it's an absolute delight, Son of Frankenstein. I recommend that to anyone. And yeah, had Universal left it all there, I think the Frankenstein series, it could have been horror's equivalent of the Godfather trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, it would have been two masterpieces followed by, you know, an excellent third entry.
Yes. But,
yeah, we then had 5 subsequent films, and picking up with The Ghost of Frankenstein in 1942, and Lon Chaney Jr. regrettably inheriting the role of the monster from Karloff, and by that time, you're not really dealing with films on the same lunatic scale. They're much more juvenile. They feel much more aimed at children. They're programmers. They're slick. They're efficient. They don't have much in the way of imagination. Certainly not an imagination comparable to that of James Whale. Yeah, so of the remaining entries, I mean, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is quite a following. I mean, it was directed by Roy William Neill, who brought such atmosphere to the Universal Sherlock Holmes cycle. And it is a very enjoyable film, but it's not a particularly great showcase for the monster. I mean, it's poor Bela Lugosi inheriting the role in that film, and he's sabotaged by the edit and looks a bit ridiculous in the makeup that's obviously aping the square contours of the Karloff head, but pressing them onto Bela Lugosi's very different head. But yeah, I mean, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, I think, is the standout of the serious entries after Son of Frankenstein. But of course, we did get quite a charming coda with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yes.
And you know, I don't find Abbott and Costello terribly funny, but I think that's probably their most entertaining film. I mean, it's certainly their most popular now. And you have Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster there. He did it 3 times for Universal. And funnily enough, I think it's actually Glenn Strange's image that is the most iconic pop culture image of the Frankenstein monster. The way the makeup sat on him. And yeah, I mean, he... You know, when Boris Karloff died, the photos accompanying some of his obituaries were actually of Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster. So he looks fantastic in the makeup, and he's able to give the monster something approaching a respectful send-off. So, yeah, Son of Frankenstein is definitely the one to go for, but Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is an awful lot of fun.
And obviously we've had a zillion Frankenstein movies since then as well.
Yeah,
how are you feeling about the upcoming Guillermo del Toro Frankenstein film later this year, James? Will you be going to see it?
Well, I'm not in it, so... I don't think I've seen the trailer yet. I think I've heard the trailer. I think I had it on in the background whilst I was doing something else. But, well, it's potentially very promising, isn't it? And
yes,
you know, what I like about Del Toro is he's so reverent about Boris Karloff and James Whale and the Universal Frankenstein films. Reverent without becoming hidebound by them. I'm absolutely sure. So I think it'll be very interesting. It's a shame it's being dumped on streaming rather than going to the cinema, though.
That is a shame. I know.
Yeah,
I'm hoping it might get a short cinema run. Sometimes they do alongside the Netflix release, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. You'll have to campaign to do that.
Yes,
as an Evolution of Horror Presents event, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. That would be lovely. Well, there we go. Well, James, thank you for this unexpected double bill of episodes that you joined me for.
I only hope I've done these films justice, Mike.
Oh, you absolutely
I get so excited. I get so excited at the Universal Frankensteins, these first two, that my brain turns to a mush. But the lesson of these films is abnormal brains. They needn't be the end.
Exactly. You've been such a pleasure to chat to you, as always, James. So thank you so much. And just remind...
You make it very easy.
Oh, well, thank you. Just remind people, if they want to come and find more James Swanton, if they want to come and find more of your stuff, or come and speak to you online, where can they find you?
I'm on Blue Sky and learning to use it, I think, very, very slowly. Instagram, I'm on... I've LETTERBOXD now, as I think I probably mentioned in the last episode. I think that's basically it. There's a Facebook page, which is basically defunct. This has been one of my quietest ever years, so I don't think I've posted very much. But I'm in a lovely new horror short called The Fairy Moon, which is starting to do the festival rounds now. So do look out for that, and I'll hopefully have some more news to share soon.
Amazing. James, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you, Mike.
And that's it. We've done Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to my brilliant guest, James Swanton. There's nobody who I would have rather had to join me for these two movies. Always such a pleasure to have James on the podcast. I really hope you guys enjoyed listening to those discussions as much as I did having them. Let me know your thoughts. Please do get in touch. You can email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on all the socials, of course. We're on particularly Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky. And if you want to discuss this week's episode with fellow listeners, you can join the Evolution of Horror Discord or the Evolution of Horror discussion group on Facebook. If you want to support this podcast and get ad-free episodes, you can join our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. And that's where you'll also get treated to weekly bonus episodes. But you can find this podcast, of course, on all the usual podcast platforms. And if you get a spare minute, I'd be so grateful if you could drop us a little rating and review on your podcast app of choice, as that really helps us get discovered by new listeners. So we are going to continue on our Frankenstein journey for next week. So next week, we are moving from the Universal era to the Hammer era. And I am going to be joined by brilliant director, filmmaker, and vintage horror aficionado, Axel Carolyn. And we are going to be discussing Curse of Frankenstein from 1957 and Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed from 1969. It's going to be a fascinating double bill. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.